I worked in a comic shop, which made me take for granted the fact that I would always have access to stuff.
Right.
So there'd be like good runs of stuff would come in, and I'd leave them, or I'd read them and then sell them. And
Hmm.
then I always just assumed I'd have them to hand. And then I left that job, and that I still borrowed stuff and was still friendly. Then I moved to Spain. When I was in Spain, I was like, oh my God, if I want to read, I don't know, Frank Miller Daredevil, I'm gonna have to buy it. And then over the past, what, 15, 20 years, I've just
Hmm.
accumulated so much stuff as like a reaction to not having stuff anymore. It's almost like I want to make sure I've got it in
Yeah.
case I don't have access to it again. And so the house is just filling and filling and filling. And I constantly have to rotate. I'm at the point now where it's one out, one in, one out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I think I've been seeing you post a lot more things like, "Hey, this is for sale," than I've noticed
Yeah.
before.
You know, I do that once in a while. What that actually means is that I'm reading stuff more. Like I've got a lot of reading around me to do.
Yeah,
And
how do you handle that? Because I mean, like, I struggle with the books that I like. And I'm not an avid collector, um, but like the stack gets thick quick, and
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've the reading pile keeps growing, and it's because of eBay, it's because of lockdown, it's because of Twitter, and sort of getting egged on by things, and having and I'm as bad for it as anyone. Of like, hey, have you seen this? And people go, oh God, what have you done to me? And
yeah,
and I'm exactly the same, you know. So part of my lockdown thing was I bought all of Gru, but like all of Gru. So I had no
Mhm.
Gru apart from a couple of
Okay,
issues that I bought in like a charity shop cheap. And then within the space of 6 months, I had like 160, 170 issues of Gru,
Jeez.
and they're sitting in the box. I've read some, I've read a
Yeah.
lot, but I have a lot more to read still. And now they've got the to sell pile sitting on top, so I can't even get to them to read the bloody things. Um,
Did I mean, was Gru a thing for you when you were young, or did you no? So it was
no, it
okay.
was on issue whatever 75 or something when I started, and my collector mentality is always like, well, if I can't start at the beginning, if someone had come into the shop I worked at and sold a run of Gru, then I might have bought it all at that time and then
Hmm.
whatever. But the idea of just jumping in, even with something that's so obviously like episodic as Gru,
Yeah.
I still feel the need to be in at the beginning, you know?
There's that really nice, and I think it's fantastic. Is the you go into shops now and they've bundled all of the issues of these comic book runs, so you can just
Yeah.
get the whole thing in one chunk. Which I love that idea because I mean that's sort of kind of the joy when when you're young and you're buying comic books and you're like, look at I've got the whole run of Paul Smith X-Men, because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were there for the whole thing or whatever whatever the jam was. Um, I think it's a beautiful thing because I mean I love trades. I think trades are the way to go as far to sort of condense the collector's bug, but having those issues is super special.
When now that the thing, so I've got like there's like aesthetic choices and sort of practical choices around all of my different sort of buying, and I like as soon as I start to see like multiple variant covers on books, then I know I'm gonna get the trade because I want all the covers, you know, and you
Right.
can't. I'm not buying multiple copies of comics. I'm not an idiot, so I'll buy I'll buy the hardcover when it comes out. It won't have all the logo and all the stuff on it, and I'll
Yeah.
get 25 pinups by good people instead of having one comic and just feeling like I'm getting slightly mugged off because I don't have all the stuff, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that, and with issues, I just they've built up again now, but there are things that I've recently like Enigma, like I'm a
Yeah.
Fagredo
Yeah. Sure.
fan, and Enigma was one that I traded up years ago, um, and even with the new hardcover that came out last year, which is lovely, I felt the need to get the issues because it feels like, and that's pure like how can I not own the comics that kind of got me started? You know, that's like some weird collector-y thing of almost like buying the vinyl, even though I haven't got a record player. You know, they're going in a box. I'm only ever going to look at the trade, but I want to know that the issues are there.
That's Enigma. I think was Enigma like kind of his first big kind of run with over at DC?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've never. It occurred to me just recently before speaking to you and thinking about Fagredo a little bit actually. Like I don't know. Like you had your British invasion, but
Hmm.
like Fagredo wasn't somebody who had a ton of stuff published in the UK. He had a few bits in a magazine called Crisis, which wasn't a massive hit or something. So I think it was actually quite a big leap to suddenly be doing big US stuff. But I guess that was all like that Shelley Bond,
Yeah.
Vertigo period of sort of scaring up the next round of like deadline artists, Philip Bond and all of those guys.
They were like, I really felt like, if you could look at it, like, I think the whole Vertigo thing was kind of that, like that A&R talent scout for, they were really
Yeah,
finding great talent and pulling them in to do books, which they weren't expecting huge numbers, but they were going to produce a great product.
yeah.
And I think I had mentioned it to you, and I'll have to find them, but I have the California. Was it what the
Yeah,
hell is it?
California, the
Yeah, I
black
have the
and white.
California. I have all the black and whites of that whole issue.
Yeah,
Um, and it's funny because my studio mate who was doing special projects work at DC came home one afternoon, and our apartment was like 5 blocks from the DC office. So he comes home and he's like, "Hey, check these out," and hands me a stack. And it's the whole run. And we were, so I didn't even look to see if the comic came out because I had it. Because
yeah,
as far as I was concerned, I had this beautiful black and white artwork. And then I think you said like, "Oh, that never came out." I'm like, "Really?" Like, I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
yeah, yeah. It's so weird. And I mean, the only chucked it would that have been like because I think that was supposed to be Vertigo, right? So that
Mhm.
was going to be like Chuck Dixon doing a Vertigo book because
Right. But
he was doing the
as a movie,
adaptation as well.
like as a movie adaptation, like it's so kind of like really all very odd. Like it didn't,
Yeah,
who knows? Yeah, if I find it, I'll make scans and send you this stuff so
no,
you can look
yeah,
at
do
it.
so because I've only got I do have it, but I've only got a really rubbish um like tiny version. So
Mhm.
I would like to have a decent
Yeah.
version if you come across it. Um, but yeah, I mean that period of Vertigo, like even like the design on the books, like
Yep.
that little strip down the left hand side that was on so many books on Animal Man, Doom Patrol. It was like their signature thing. I guess it was Richard Brunning or something came up with it, but it really made those books pop. And then
Yeah.
amazing covers and um, yeah, I wasn't into everything, but it all really spoke to me on the shelf, you know.
Sure. It was interesting. So, because I was, penciling at that era, and what was kind of interesting how they, because I would do coloring, like I would try to color my own work whenever I could. But the difference between like Marvel was like you got 25% difference in your colors. Like, so you could go like, you know, 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100% of
Yeah,
whatever, CMY or K you chose.
yeah,
And but DC allowed you 10%. So you really had like they had so much more variety in the tones you could put together. So that's really why like those Vertigo books stood out. It was a nicer paper and they had such greater color control.
yeah. I mean, they had some pretty odd colorists. Like, I don't want to kind of call anybody out, but some of their books, despite what you just said, which meant that someone like Sherilyn Van Valkenburg could do amazing colors on Enigma. They had
Mhm.
some really drab. It's like how many shades of green and grey and brown can you put on a page? You know.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason they recolored all the first sort of 20 Sandman or whatever. You know, they didn't recolor all of them, but they for the Absolute and subsequent publications, they've recolored them because they're pretty dreary looking, even though they had all of those colors
Yeah.
at their fingertips. You know, but
Well,
how many comics did you actually draw, or like how
I,
much?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, a few dozen, and
Okay,
I did, but I did plenty of like, special projects work for DC and for Marvel because it was a lot more money. You would,
Okay.
oh, hey, can you do a cup design for
Yeah.
Universal Studios tour? You're like, sure, and it paid for like literally half of a comic book to do one drawing. So
Yeah.
it wasn't rocket science. But yeah, it was an interesting time. It was, I mean, it's funny because, you look at the point of like I was a massive comic book collector growing up. And I go off to art school, I'm like, I'm going to go off and I'm going to learn how to become a comic book artist. And I go and do that. And the minute I got into business, I just stopped buying comic books. Like, and yes, you get comps.
Automatically.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think it was a combination of not having a lot of money, and the fact that you could get free books. Like those two things kind of made not buying new stuff a thing. So a lot of stuff slipped by me in the 90s. Like it was just one of these decades of like, wait, when did this happen? Like that kind of stuff. Like I just
Yeah.
didn't, and like like I saw more stuff doing conventions than I did sort of my work life. I would, or when you're in an editor's office going, hey, what's that? You grab
Yeah.
some pages or something like that. Yeah, it's
Well, it's
just,
interesting because that's where my kind of um, that's where I feel relatively niche in that I'm still into comics, despite having been into comics in the 90s, when a lot of people aren't because they just got burnt out by Image or like, you look at so many Marvel comics, they're either unreadable, you can't look at them because the colors are so awful. There was so much crap published in that decade, but if from working in retail, you kind of had sort of, you got to see everything. So you
yeah.
got to see the 99% that was crap, but you get like these little gems of like a random issue of Dark Horse Presents with, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a little John Arcudi strip called doesn't matter, it'll come back to me.
Okay.
There's a John Arcudi two-parter, and Fagretto did one of the covers, which might have been why it got my attention. But the artist went off to work for ILM. He only ever did 3 or 4 comics that I'm aware of, but those are just like shining diamonds in my collection that nobody else can really relate to because people either left just before or they left after or they came in later. There aren't many people around who were in a position that they could weather the 90s and all the crap that they had thrown at them.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, like I mean, I felt fortunate for my peer group. The bulk of the guys who were in Gaijin, sort of the Gaijin studios were my peers, and they did such great projects through the 90s, even though there may have been some sort of blah overall tone for the 90s, but their work
Yeah,
was great. And then you would get these guys like, Aaron Weisenfeld, who just showed up,
yeah,
did what, 8 comic books, and then
yeah,
just took off, and they
yeah.
were amazing.
But that guy's amazing because I didn't read any continuity books, so I didn't know him because he and Richard Bennett were both like continuity guys, right? And
think
then
so.
he did 2 issues of Cable, which were just like weird and like I looked at them recently thinking about rebuying them, and I'm glad that I could sort of have a look online first and go, no, you don't need to go that far back, but he did 2 issues of Cable, he did an X-Men annual, and it's all pretty weird looking stuff. And then he starts on Team 7, and in those 4 issues of a comic, you get to see him just transform into this like mega talent, who then only did another 3 comics or something after that
Yeah, right.
before abandoning us to go and paint huge, lovely paintings.
Yeah, and I mean, and there were plenty of people, like, I mean, Travis, Cheris really was this amazing talent to watch him go from, what was sort of a house style of Image to what he developed. I mean, he
Yeah,
influenced a lot of people pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time. I mean, the perspective of being in it versus being outside of it and looking at it, like I didn't have any perspective. I'm just like
yeah.
scrabbling my way through it, and smiling and having a great time. But it's an interesting period. I mean, I look now and I'm just so envious and blown away by like what is coming out in comic books in general right now. The bar is so high, the production values are so good, and like it's really quite an impressive period.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of what?
I had a. We're incredibly lucky. I think it's like a proper golden age. We had every once in a while I get something pop up in Twitter, and I know not to sort of pick at it, but I posted something just recently, and somebody replied, "Yeah, it's a shame all the big publishers scare off all the real artists nowadays," and I'm like, I sense something going on here. I'm not going to ask any questions.
Yeah,
This isn't the point for me to come back and tell you all the great art that you're not aware of, because I suspect
right.
that we're not really on the same page, either politically or artistically.
Right.
So I kind of leave that where it is. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking just today, like in preparation for this, like the amount of there's people doing work digitally, which I think has sort of mixed results. Like I've noticed like a weird, I've noticed like a weird trend of there's a couple of artists who are quite high profile who I get their books and they've got like terrible anatomy or things like
Mm.
where you have like an arm go behind something and they've clearly lost track of like where the elbow is. And as you
Right.
look at it, you're like, that arm's about 6 inches too long. Like, what's going? So this kind of weird stuff that I don't think you'd make those mistakes if you were working it out on paper in front of you necessarily. There's
Yeah.
something about the shortcuts coming from digital that are leading some people that have only perhaps only ever drawn digitally into some sort of bad habits maybe. But there's so much between, I've heard you talking about Greg Smallwood. Um, Duncan Rouleau for me is like you're like the first person who got the hybrid of digital
Yeah.
and analog and managed to play with like sort of repeating stuff but without it being boring, like taking shapes and making patterns and stuff. Like
Mhm.
his Metal Men book was amazing. But yeah, currently between your Smallwoods and your James Stocco and James Harron, they're not all called James, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
just it's Matthias Bergara.
Yeah.
Um, I
It's it,
did you read Step by Step or
I
Step by
did not
Bloody
read it.
Step?
I mean, the amount of people one of my close friends owns a comic book store, so he's
Oh,
always saying
okay.
like, he's always like, you should check this out, and I'm like, I can't keep up with the things that you're saying I should check out. Like, either it'll send me into the poorhouse, or I'll just go, or my wife will kick me out, one or the other.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, it's a nutty thing. When did like so like for me, like the collecting compulsion, like it's an interesting thing to have, like you were saying, like having to have that whole sort of complete thing. And
yeah,
it I don't know exactly, like I think it came from loving some story early on, and I really do believe, for me, even though I didn't have every single issue right off the bat, it was the first year of the Micronauts for me. Like that was the thing that like I knew I was in love with this comic book.
yeah,
And then not too soon after, it was like that sort of involvement of the X-Men, of going, oh wow, this is really cool too, and start buying this kind of stuff. And then I think there's just this idea of like, oh, but I can now, once you learn you can find those issues you're missing, it gets exciting. You're like, oh, I
yeah,
can kind of fill that gap in. And I remember my cousin said to me once, I gave his son, I don't know, 3 or 4 like DVDs of music I burned onto DVDs. I'm like, "Hey, you're going off to college," or whatever it was, like, "Here's a whole bunch of music." And he copied all the stuff, and he's like, "You have such like a deep catalog of these artists." Like, I would get everything, like if I liked U2, I would buy all the remixes of the whatevers, whoever was
yeah,
taking songs and, doing their own dance mix. Because I just was really interested in how everybody approach it, and having all that stuff. And I think that was part and parcel of the comic books. Like, what was it for you? Do you remember what the thing was?
Well, I started with British comics and Asterix when I was a proper kid. When it comes to like American comics, so and there was a gateway thing where the Action Force Weekly was reprinting GI Joe monthly, and
Oh,
so you'd
cool.
get like eight pages or so a week of an issue of GI Joe. So over the month, you'd get the whole issue, whatever. And I remember I had like one of those Proustian moments when I saw the golden GI Joe annual,
Yeah.
like an actual like the US version, because I looked at it and it took me back to like, oh my god, I remember this. I've seen this
Mhm.
before. I remember the car with the slightly bendy car with the
Yep.
wheels that were going in ways that they shouldn't go, and the wind blowing and stuff. And so seeing that annual, I was like, oh, I remember this. But when I was in secondary school, maybe 12, 13, there was I got into a group of friends, and one of them lent me Jim Lee's X-Men #1, which was just out in the newsagents, so just out in like the corner shops, you know. And so I bought X-Men #1 and then discovered the comic shop in town. So, like you're saying about, oh, I can get the back issues. I bought X-Men #1 week, and then the week after found a shop that had X-Men #1, 2, and 3, because the speciality shops had them at the same time as the US. So it was like, oh my god, they got everything. And then it was like, and there's X-Force and X-Factor and Uncanny, and I just had a bit of money coming in at the time and nothing to spend it on. So I went deep, and then I went all image, and I just got bigger and bigger into whatever was going on in the early '90s, and then one day I was sat with my pile of comics that I paid 60, 70 quid for in '93. So and then like $100 worth of comics or
Yeah,
something. So
sure.
and I've got multiple issues of things because I let them build up, and I was looking at some of the second and third tier kind of extreme books, and then I was looking at the second and third tier homage books or Wildstorm books, and I had like a kind of like an epiphany of something's got to give. Like I'm not reading all this stuff, and that's when I kind of stopped reading just everything, and that
Mhm.
coincided with reading Why I Hate Saturn, Contract with God, and Enigma that I got out of the library, and
Wow.
that kind of opened my eyes. Like, oh my god, look at all this other stuff,
Yeah.
Oh, and the other one was a copy of the kitchen sink hardcover of Space Spirit, Eisner,
Mhm.
Jules Pfeiffer, Eisner, Wally Wood, some hybrid of the three, but
Yeah.
basically Wally Wood, Space Spirit. And so between Wally Wood, Carl Baker, Will Eisner, and Fagredo, I was like, oh, there's no going back.
No.
But and then I was working in a comic shop while I was studying, and then my studies kind of got away from me, and I left that comic shop closed down, and I started going to shop at Gosh, and which is a well-known comic shop in central London, and I went in and I was looking through the back issues, and I pulled out there was an issue of Jason Pearson's Savage Dragon, Blood and Guts,
Sure.
and I pulled it out and said to the guy, one of my old customers is now one of your customers, and I know he was looking for issue 2. He's got 1 and 3, but he needed 2. And then a couple of days later, I got a letter home offering me a job at the shop, and then I worked there for 10 years, because it was like, well, if this level of commitment or whatever, and I'm still the same person today. I don't know what there's probably some psychology there.
Yeah.
Dreaming about. I told a customer once at Gosh, I've got those martial law. I've got those martial law pinhead comics for you. And I went down to like his little section to pull the comics out, and they weren't there. And as I stood up, I was like, I think I dreamed it.
Oh, no.
Like I dreamed I'd found his back issues. He was quite sort of understanding, but
Oh,
yeah, I guess it kind of got into me really quite deep.
but those 4 that you cited are pretty strong, sort of works to shift someone,
Yeah.
away. I mean, Saturn, man, that book, Kyle spoke in one of my classes. It's in when I was in art school. So that was my sort of first engagement with him. I'd seen his work up to that point, and then
Yeah,
but when Saturn came out, man, that book, I mean, it's such a just a lovely piece of art in every aspect.
yeah,
It's one of my favorites. Um, yeah, no, I mean, it's sort of interesting how those are kind of a good spectrum of kind of showing like what can be done in the medium that's not what is the commonplace.
yeah. And
It's
it's kept me looking for years, trying to sort of chase the dragon, sort of trying to find the and so I'm still the same today. If I buy something new by somebody, I have to dig deep, see how far back I can go before it becomes sort of unrecognizable or
Mhm.
uninteresting. But like Carl Baker's been a really interesting one to follow because he's embraced technology. He's gone to some sort of strange places with his style. You
Mhm.
know, I'll always my Cowboy Wally and Why I Hate Saturn are like where my heart is. But
Yeah.
it's great to watch him evolve, and he's all he's still brilliant.
Yep.
Um, it's a shame he's sort of off the radar a little bit at this point. You know, he's just self-publishing through Amazon, I think.
It's a very strange thing that there are these artists who we all as fans and people in the industry and people like myself out of the industry, who we there are these artists who are still incredibly powerful and vibrant, and you wonder why are we not seeing more of their work? Like, you look at a Rick Leonardi, who I just think is just one of the most unique artists to put pencil to paper, in
Yeah,
all the years, and he still does amazing work. And there's all these people, like Kyle, who, I mean, the last thing I really remember reading that Kyle did was the comic he did with Kevin McCarthy.
oh, the little kind of Astro Boy thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
It's on
who
the
knows.
reading pile.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
no, it's great. I mean, Kevin's a great friend, and I just, and
okay,
I'll hunt down anything he does. And then when he's working with Kyle, I was like, well, it's a 2 for 1. I get two people
absolutely.
I love in one shot. So, um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my introduction to what I'll call alternative comics was I think what is it, 1983, 82, 83 when Nexus came out.
Oh
And
yeah,
so my friend who was far cooler than I was apparently was buying this comic amongst other things. And he was like, "Oh, check this one out." And I was like offended that it didn't have color. Like I was like, "Why is this black and white?" My brain couldn't, make that connection. But
they
he
haven't finished it. Why
I know,
haven't they finished it?
right? But I powered through, and I fell in love with that that comic and that those that art, and Steve Rude, man, it was just such a interesting, I was about to say a breath of fresh air, but it's more of like a breath of classic
Yeah,
air. um
yeah, golden air.
Golden
Yeah,
air. Oh, I like that. Yeah. um I was thinking about what you were talking about, like artists digitally and getting a little uh lazy in some sense. But I almost feel that because the tool is so powerful, that the intention of I can do the whole page, so I'll be able to draw it and ink it all in sort of one action. I think that takes up a lot more time than people intentionally believe. Like sitting down and just penciling a page is that's a big task of work, but then having to make it a finished piece of printable artwork is another layer on top of that. And I think, there is only so much time. So I think that speed factor gets changed, and you start, maybe, as you said, cut corners or whatever the thing is.
yeah.
And I don't,
Look,
I don't
I
know.
think that thing of having like a bit of art that you can turn upside down. I heard David Peterson talking about sort of sticking stuff in Photoshop and flipping it to make sure the eyes are right and
Yeah.
stuff. You know, Jim Lee. I remember hearing years ago about Jim Lee turning this page upside down. Chris
Mhm.
Sprouse drawing everything 3 times. Like, there's all these kind of these different sort of approaches to the same sort of verification, and it just feels for me that for some of the stuff that I'm looking at, it looks like the people doing it haven't necessarily been given that sort of knowledge of like,
Yeah.
step away from it for an hour and come back before you call it finished and see if you still like it in an hour. Because I'm looking at stuff just going, what's going on there? And then you've got someone like Dan Mora, who's incredibly quick and just seems to have, there's something a bit kind of Greg Capullo about some of his like Superman and Batman stuff,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is what I'm reading now, like World's Finest. But he's doing something of his own with it. I'm assuming it's digital, and it looks fantastic for it. Like he's kind of nailed it. He's quick.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. He's prolific. You know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it's almost like that thing that artists get fed up of like, what pen do you use? What brush do you use? As if
Sure.
that's going to break,
There's a
that's going to
secret.
decode everything.
Yeah. Well, it's what is really interesting about that, and I think there's a false impression that yields positive results in that respect, which I don't think people are really kind of gathering what it is. And what I think actually happens is with anybody using any tool, typically you will plateau using that tool. There's a skill
Mm,
set that you kind of go, okay, you may not even realize that you can't get anything more out of it. And I remember doing that in art school, like in figure drawing classes. And one of my teachers came by one day and just said, "Here, use this," and grabbed something out of my box and just made me draw with like vine charcoal or something repugnant. But
yeah.
what that did is it forced my mind to have to solve that problem. How do I make the drawing work with this new tool? And I think what happens is when someone's like, "Hey, what pen are you using?" And they go, "Oh, well, I'm using the Pentel blah blah blah." And you go, "Okay, cool." And you're like all jazzed up and positive because you like the results what someone else is getting from it. So you think, "Okay, this is the thing." And often you will have you go into it positively, and so you will struggle with it, but with hope, with good hopes, and you'll get
Mm,
something kind of good out of it. And you think, "Oh, well, this is the answer is
because
in
of
the
the pen.
tool." But it's actually your brain is relearning and gathering some power out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think it's just this kind of false kind of narrative. Our brains tell us we think it's an external thing rather than this internal kind of development. And I think any tool works that way. Um, but so, okay, you and I wanted to. You asked me like, hey, what can we, what can we talk about? Of course, we could talk about anything apparently.
Yes. And for a long time. But
Yeah,
going back to sorry, just going back to Rick Leonardi, he
yeah,
followed
yeah.
me on Twitter. He followed me on Twitter, which is
No way.
I know it's not I know it means sort of nothing, but it's quite nice. I mean, I've followed him for 30 years, so
Oh yeah.
turnabout is fair play.
Oh,
But
okay, so I'll give you some quick Rick Leonardi stuff. And he's a great guy, and I've met him a couple of times. But the first time I met him, and I wouldn't even say it was a meet, is I was walking into the office. My editor was picked me up in the lobby at Marvel and my friend was in tow, and Rick was leaving or coming in at the same time. I can't remember which. And someone was just like, "Oh, hey, Alex, do you know Rick?" And I'm like, "Oh no, hey, how you doing?" My buddy, who wasn't in the industry at the time and wanted to be, got all very formal at the moment, and he's like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Leonardi. It's a real pleasure to meet you." Like it was this real sort of like job interview moment, and I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. You can be really kind of casual. He's a human." Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that man. I don't know. He's always been magic in my book. I just think his work is the best. Um,
Yeah, I translated. There was an interview he did for a Spanish magazine, so I translated that because I'd never seen an interview by him, and I didn't
mhm.
speak Spanish as yet, and I just thought it'd be good practice. So I sat down and diligently went through this what turned out to be quite a long interview, and posted it on my blog. It's still out there somewhere.
How's your
But
Spanish now?
oh, it's good. My wife's Colombian, and I lived
Oh,
in Barcelona for 9 years, 8 years, 9 years.
it's a
Um,
yeah. That's where that's one of the cities we spent our time in when our honeymoon was Barcelona, and
oh, okay.
yeah, it's
What kind of year
I
was
mean,
that?
2004.
Oh, okay, I'd have been there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we went to um, Bilbao, flew into Bilbao, and then we took a train from the two trains down to Cordoba, and then we just kind of pissed around in a car for like a week or so, and then ended up in taking a train up to Barcelona for like another week. Just had a great time.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great hangout city. Like
Yeah,
I enjoy going back just for the kind of, if you're working there, it's the same as any other city. But as a city to just spend downtime in, I think it's probably one of the best, certainly one of the best I've been to.
it's
Um,
it's great. I mean, it has everything you need. It's just it's wonderful. So yeah, big fan of that city, and love to go back sometime. So all right, one thing we were talking about was like, maybe like we could talk about like some of our favorite junk from the year that we
yes.
so
And so, what
um
junk do you have if your mate can't get you to buy anything?
oh well, no, I do buy stuff, but so I like was thinking about like what were the things that are kind of like favorites for me, like, and how were they favorites? Like, so like favorite sort of mini series run for me, like beginning to end kind of thing. And I know it started in 2021, but I think Catwoman Lonely City for me might be like one of the sort of tour de force pieces of work this year. And an interesting hybrid of digital and traditional comic book artwork in that right too.
Does he
Uh,
work digitally?
so I think he pencils his stuff out digitally, and
Oh,
then
he's
he prints it out with
okay.
blue, and then he inks it. He inks it traditionally, and then scans it back.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what Fagredo did. I didn't realize he worked that way. I mean, it's a beautiful line he's got, and yeah, everything about that book looked amazing. And
Yeah,
I was a bit pissed off that he did two covers himself, because from the beginning I was like, okay, well I guess I'm getting a collection of it. That was like a double dipper.
yeah.
Um,
But
I thought. No,
the
sorry, I was
question,
going to say. I thought the ending was a little strange. It was like a tonal shift. But I was thinking it kind of matched Dark Knight in that way of kind of suddenly having Superman in it.
Mhm.
This suddenly had the demon in it, and I wonder if it wasn't like a deliberate kind of
No,
tonal match.
I wouldn't be too surprised. And I mean, I keep threatening to have Cliff come on back and talk, specifics about the book, now that it's over.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I get such vibes of, year one and, and Dark Knight Returns, from reading this, and not sort of
yeah,
like, not piece for piece kind of stuff, but he's definitely like, I think he's really focused on making something that has sort of this, I don't know, pillar like quality to it. Like, here
yeah.
we go. Well,
It's
I don't
got
know.
longevity, right? He's
Yeah.
made something that's gonna last, and something that aside from maybe Darwin Cook's Selena's big score,
Yep.
is probably kind of absent for Catwoman as a character. The Brubaker run was good, but it was sort of diminishing returns as a run. You
Yeah.
know, it was good all the way through, but there's something about a controlled something that's got a beginning, mid, and end, and that you can just give to somebody in a one-er, and I think he's kind of achieved that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to rereading it without the big gaps in between,
Right.
and changes your expectations slightly about what you're getting. So as soon as I saw that huge demon in issue 4, even though he might have been in issue 3, I was like, sorry, what happened?
Yeah.
And it sort of threw me a bit, but
I think there's,
beautiful.
and I think one thing I really respect in this sense, and I don't, I don't know how everyone else feels about it, is I'm really kind of pleased that DC is willing to say, we're not going to force this to be on this particular schedule. Like, when the books are done, we release it. And I kind of feel that has worked for their to their advantage in the terms of what we're getting as a result from this Black Label,
Yeah,
line. They're not kind of saying it's got to be here in 2 months or we're done. I don't know. I just think that's an interesting approach for the books, and we're kind of reaping some benefits from that artistically. And I've said it before, and I think it's like the big mic. Like, it is such a you know, he's doing everything. Like, how many people are doing everything
yeah,
for a big publisher? Like, it just doesn't happen. Um, so I don't.
yeah. Everything's everything, or he didn't do the letters or something,
He
right?
did. He did the
Oh, he
lettering.
did.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, sorry, that was it. On another podcast, I heard somebody jokingly giving him stick for not doing his own flatting or something. But, taking the piss, like joking, but so yeah, so he did everything. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's, I don't know, because maybe it's, maybe it's the internal part of me going, "Gee, I wish I could have done that myself," or is it just me saying like, "I'm so happy to see somebody do that." Like it's not, it is uncommon. Um, was there sort of a beginning to end kind of thing, like issue wise, that you dug this in the last year?
um, yeah. I mean, I've that Step by Bloody Step. I think that falls into that
Okay.
category. That was that's interesting because every time I pick it up, it's got the Batman Year One um, characteristic, which is that if I look at the first page, I'm going to end up reading at least another 30 or 40 page. I can't
Totally.
just look. I,
Yeah.
I can't just read like, oh, I should have come by plane or whatever.
Mhm.
Or Barbara's coming by plane or whatever that opening line is from Year One. And so yeah, Step by Bloody Step is silent, is wordless rather, and so it lulls you into this idea that you'll probably be able to skim it or whatever. But it's not the case at all, and the art is so um, it feels like a cross between like Miyazaki and Mobius. This kind of world he's created, and I literally just got in the post the French version, which is
Oh,
about
cool.
20% bigger both ways,
Mhm.
and it makes the world that much more kind of impactful. I feel a little bit like reading it for the first time, but that book's amazing. I think some of the story, some of the specifics of the plot were a little difficult to get hold of. Like I heard somebody else talking about it, and then Rick was like, "Oh, so that's why that was happening or whatever."
Mhm.
But because it's wordless, you just take away what you take away. Um, and then that's the other thing that's got going for it is the colors by a guy called Matias Lopez, um, who also colored Supergirl by Bilquis Everly, which was written by Tom King, and that would be another
Yeah.
book that's kind of top drawer from the past year. So I've got another colorist to follow in the way that I've been following Dave Stewart for years or whatever. It's like if they're on it, there's probably something going on. At least give it a look.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, it's speaking of the golden age, we are in that golden age of colorists right now because of the digital tools, what they can do. So Dave Stewart is just, a master. I mean, yeah, there's so many really just exceptional colorists who are putting this level of work into these pages, which just you know, are way more than what we were putting in pencil wise, 25 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a sucker for sort of recolors, getting stuff in black and white that was originally colored.
Mhm.
Um, I really enjoy being able to tell the difference that the colors are making to things,
Yeah.
um, and even I think I did my remastered Alex Toth personal project,
Yeah.
and part of that was fixing some of the colors
Mhm.
where things have been colored, like they colored a hand in the same color as the wall or something by
Right.
mistake, and then just going through and picking out little things, correcting little errors in an eye and these kind of things, and you just see how dramatic the impact of the colors can be. So you look at now where you got the penciler and or inker doing all this work to put lines down, and then the power of the colorist to just obliterate it or kind of harmonize with it,
Yeah.
and sometimes you get these teams like Dave Stewart seems like somebody who's like an all-rounder, like he can work with anyone and has a range of styles. um, and then there are other colorists who I think are far less flexible,
Yeah.
like some of the biggest in the business who keep getting jobs because they're the biggest and work with the biggest, but their impact on other artists isn't positive. Let me say, I'm
Yeah,
being uncommonly tactful.
yeah, no, yeah, no. I mean, I wonder if that. I wonder if that's like kind of a reflection on, maybe you do have a great vibe with a specific style of artwork, and artist, and that sort of sets a tone for everyone going like, well, that was such a great book. Let's get that colorist or
Yeah,
inker on that. And it really is. I mean, you just can't throw bass player X into a band and expect that bass player to really kind of gel. Like, I think that I mean, it's such a crapshoot.
yeah. Are you familiar with Dean White's colors? I guess Dean
Yeah,
White, like
yeah.
he started off. I think he started off doing the Marvel Masterworks sort of painted covers over Kirby and Byrne, and like giving those kind of like a consistent feel, and it was kind of peculiar looking, um, but sort of really lush and sort of brushy. And then he worked with Ramita Jr. for ages.
Hmm.
Um, Jerome Pena on Uncanny X Force, and I think he's just amazing, and I think it's a real crime that he didn't get to color Ramita Jr. on like Superman Year One or whatever it was called. Yeah, Superman Year One. That kind of like if you were trying to go for that Lynn Varley thing,
Hmm.
then Dean White is probably as close as you're going to get in sort of modern terms to being
Yeah.
able to achieve something similar. But I understand that it was like editorial decisions and things involved.
Yeah, there are those choices that happen.
Yeah.
They definitely sometimes, most people, yeah, listen, I get it, it's a business, man. They've got to fit, like, there's a lot of pieces that they have to, make fit. So you
Yeah.
mentioned Miyazaki. So that made me think of, so I think what I enjoyed greatly this year was the YA, I guess it's a YA book, Salt Magic by Hope Larson and
Oh, I
Rebecca
don't
Mock.
know.
So
Sorry, I
Hope
stepped on you. Rebecca.
Mock, Mock.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and Hope lives here in the same town as me, so we're buddies. And it's by Margaret Ferguson Books at Holiday House, Salt Magic.
Okay.
And it takes place in 1919, like sort of at the tail end of World War One, and it takes place in like I don't know, Oklahoma or somewhere, like in a very sort of pre Dust Bowl era. And Rebecca's artwork is unbelievable. You definitely will get it if you like Miyazaki. You're going to get a real kick out of her work. And they won
Okay.
they won the Eisner for the book this year. So
Yeah, I've become a bit of an old man with the Eisners because I don't recognise so much, as opposed to it. There's so much that I don't recognise that instead of it being like, oh, there's something I don't know, I'll go and have a look. It's like I don't know anything, so where
yeah,
do I even begin to have a look?
right, yeah,
It's kind of usual suspects, and then a load of things I've never heard of. So
sure.
so I've sort of stopped paying attention. But now it looks really nice. I'm just googling as we speak. I'll see if I can track that down.
Yeah, it's real good. And if you have access to children, they will get a real kick out of it. It's a nice story, with some fantastic, a nice fantastic sort of edge to the world that it's in, kind of little magic. And I don't read a lot of YA, so this was sort of, it was
that was on my mind. How much YA did you read?
no, I read little to none, because I have a friendly relationship with Hope. I wanted to read the book, and it's just, it's great stuff. So, and they won the Eisner,
Cool.
so it can't be all bad, right?
And Eisner for best graphic or best YA or
I think it might be best YA graphic. Yeah,
okay.
and I think
Yeah,
they're up
I
for French award.
okay. Like Angoulême or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm currently reading the Eduardo Rizzo Sergeant Rock mini. Have you seen that?
Oh no, that's cool. I love Sergeant Rock.
It's Sergeant Rock. It's written by it's written by Bruce Campbell, and drawn and coloured by. That's what it looks like for your benefit. So
Okay.
you got Gary Frank covers,
Nice.
and they are very nice. But it's I mean it's World War II, Eduardo Rizzo drawing.
Oh, very cool.
Drawings Sergeant Rock versus zombie Nazis.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's a few issues. I think it's like 6 issues long or something. But like going back to what you're saying about the DC scheduling thing, I think DC are just consistently sort of covering themselves in glory in most areas for their main line of books. And I read what looks interesting. I read what's by people that I like, and sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised by something that I've not heard of before that's getting a little bit of buzz. But it just isn't really happening with Marvel books, and hasn't been for a little while, give or take, like really odd special projects. But have you? Nice House on the Lake is one that a retailer, and in fact, my first comic shop boss. I was ordering from a shop online, and it turned out to be the manager of my first shop from when I was like 16.
Oh, that's cool.
I emailed and said, "Have you got issue 3 of this or something?" And he came back, and I saw the town, and I was like, "What are the chances that there's someone else called Matt selling comics in this town that I've only ever heard of in the context of him?" And so we've been back in touch after like 25, 30 years since then. But in the first shipment of comics that he sent me, he dropped in a copy of Nice House on the Lake #1, which I wouldn't have looked at based on the covers necessarily. Just kind of pretty consistent with a lot of other stuff that's on the shelf based on the covers. But it's really, really nice art. It's a good, strange mystery. It's 11 issues in. I can only assume they're going to do. I can't imagine it's going to finish in the next issue, because I can't see where it's going at all, and it doesn't feel like it's actually going anywhere. So it's really quite a strange experience. But I'm always happy when it's like a new artist, you know. And this is a guy called Alvaro Martinez Bueno, I think his name is, and he's excellent. He just created an amazing world. The whole thing takes place in like a luxury house, similar to like the house in Ex Machina, or one of these sort of tech billionaires type houses. And the conceit is that they're the last sort of 10 people on Earth after some invasion of aliens or something that's gone on outside. But really, really interesting. But yeah, I've got no idea. Issue 12 is going to surprise me, whatever happens, because I can't imagine what's going on. Worth it.
I mean, isn't that the best part about a story, is if you are engaged into into the actual events of a story and the characters of the story, but yet you're still, I guess, in the dark as to where this is going to actually go, and not in the terms of like, I don't think they have an idea. Like those are the worst kind of stories, like when you're like, I don't think they have any idea what they're doing, versus this sort of like, how are they going to pull this off? Because that whole question of how are they going to pull it off is the thing that I get real excited about, because the hardest thing to do about writing is writing the ending. So it's everybody reading is the the Romanian judge in the Olympics, waiting to give that 2 because you're going to fall off the balance beam or whatever the damn thing you're doing is. So sticking that landing is so important. And the fact that you don't know if it's 12 issues or 16 or 24 issues, you're just going, what's going on?
But it had a weird thing. Like, I thought it was going to be 10 issues. I should mention that it's written by James Tinian IV.
Oh, yeah.
And coloured by Jordi Belair as well, who's, another one of the good ones. And
this is a very harsh condemnation on colorists. Colorists don't stick around. It might get worse.
No, I mean, she's excellent. And I mean, she sort of started from the beginning. It was like, there's clearly Dave Stewart's an influence. But as time's gone on, and in fact, not just quite quickly, she had her own thing going on. But yeah, so it's written by James Tinian Tynan IV, and under the logo, it's got 10 little icons, one for each of the characters, and each issue is moved across from one icon to the next. So it got to about issue 8, and I was thinking, God, there's only 2 issues left. Like, what's going on? And I tweeted out about it just in case anybody knew, and I probably could have found out easier. But the artist actually came back and said, no, it's 12 issues. So now it's got to issue 11, and it's jumped back to one of the earlier numbers. But it seemed to be following this very specific thing of like, you know, a countdown, and then the last 2 numbers, it seems to be a free for all. So who knows what's going to happen in those little circles on issue 12?
Well, okay. Well, it is deep into the run, so I guess I'll wait for the trade on that one. But
yeah, and they've done the first half, but I don't know why anyone would buy half a story in a trade when give it a month and you'll be able to get a nice fat complete one. But I would recommend it.
Okay, well, so I guess that'll lead me to my next one, and we've already uttered his name, so we have to, or actually uttered both of their names. But
okay,
there we go. The Human Target.
We go. Human Target.
Yeah.
What a book.
I mean, this is a book that I feel Darwin would enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I feel Tom is writing his most noir kind of, you know, quality in this, and Greg's artwork is unbelievable.
Yeah, I got him on Dream Thief, like on Dark Horse. I picked up on his work on that, and I've been keeping an eye on him since. And it felt like he couldn't get any better than what he was doing on Moon Knight.
Right.
And yet he just seems to keep getting better and bringing new stuff to the table. No?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in this one, or at least it feels to me in this one, that his sense of design is really, really, like, he's really improved on his overall sense of design for like his panel layouts and his composition for the entire page, you know, using color and shape. So yeah, it's, I mean, he's just drawing from all these great sources and just kind of making some sort of and the coloring and the production of the at least this, you know, this collected edition is really some of the best quality I've seen in a long time. And Clayton Coles, man, this is a letterer in my opinion who is as important on the books as most any other part of the book. He really brings equality to the reading of the comic in his typography that really is kind of hard to match.
Yeah, he's never wrong. Like you never find yourself in the wrong place, or you know, it's kind of that, like lettering feels to me, you have like your John Workmans and you have your big sort of showy people, but lettering to me feels like one of those things, like it's at its best if you're not noticing it, you know. It's almost like the soundtrack of a film or something, you know. You might recognize it on a second listening, and you might get something out of it if you're paying attention to that particular art, but otherwise reading a comic, the lettering is just sort of carries you through. And then all it takes is somebody sticking the bubble in the word balloon in the wrong place, and you're completely taken out of your experience. It's completely ruined, and that never happens with that guy Clayton Cowles. However it's pronounced.
Yeah, I thought it was Cowles, and then I think his Twitter handle says Coles, like, and he phonetically spells it out. So
okay, good man.
Like, I will not make the mistake again. But yeah, it is. But I think you hit the nail. That's the perfect description. Is if the lettering disappears in the terms, it's in service to the story, and then like on reread, you go, oh, look at what's happening here. Like you're able to kind of dig in. And I think artwork does the same thing. Like I think if you can kind of like get through the book and then really go back and look at the art and go, whoa, like I didn't even realize what was happening here because you're enraptured by the storytelling.
Yeah. Well, the other letterer who's come onto my radar as somebody who seems to do books that are worthy, and he's doing the 20th century men with the
Dennis.
guy whose name, with Dennis,
Yeah.
and his lettering, his design's amazing. And I first saw him on that book with Ian Bertram and Darcy Van Polgeest. You know the thing that it's kind of like a little bird. It was called.
Okay.
Did you ever see Little Bird?
I don't think I saw it. No.
Oh man, that's
I'm
amazing.
I'm writing all this stuff down, Billy. So don't.
Good. Yeah, that's amazing. If you can find the hardcover, then just dive straight in. Like Ian Bertram is a guy whose art I first saw on like an issue of Detective Comics, like a special, like a 1027 or something, and it was an old man, Bruce Wayne, at like his 80th birthday or something, and I liked it well enough, but it had energy of it's like a bit Frank Quietly, a bit Frank Miller, a bit Frank Quietly, and it didn't leap out at me at that point. And then he did a book for Dark Horse with, I think it was Pete Tomasi. I may be wrong, but it was about that the Winchester house. You know, the house where the woman just keeps building and building and building on her house because she's cursed by dead Indians. So House of Penance, it always comes back to me. But yeah, House of Penance was where I was first like, oh my God, he's really good. And then he sort of disappeared for a while because I think his stuff takes a while. But then Little Bird is him, Darcy Van Polgeest, who's a screenwriter, I believe, or director, who's just done this one book so far, I think. And Matt Hollingsworth on colours, and Adit Yarbidikar, I'm going to go for pronunciation wise. And it's just an amazing, it feels like the best sort of Grendel, like the Tim Sale kind of Grendel that you got towards the end of the original run. And it just looks amazing. And the storytelling and the composition, like panel choices and page, I mean, everything about it is just absolutely top drawer, really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not getting too far away in colors, but Matt is one of my favorite. Matt is one of my favorite colorists. I think Matt's just super skilled. I don't know how he is capable of putting all the work he does into a page. It is ridiculous.
While making his own beers.
While making his own beer, right? I mean, he's a man of great talent and skill, and he is a charming motherfucker too. So
I've not met him.
No, he can win them all. So he's a good dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
He did he painted the Grendel Devils and Deaths. So I knew him as like a normal kind of flat kind of a normal colorist. And then on Grendel Devils and Deaths with Edwin Bjerkovic, and Darko McCann, he got to sort of break out his proper paints.
His paints,
and that was where I first saw him kind of cut loose on a non kind of DC or Marvel type style, and I've been sort of following him ever since. And it's funny because you see, like, I honestly think that Dave Stewart's at the point where he should they should rename the Colorist Award as like the Dave Stewart Award and just take him out of the loop, you know? Because he wins it most years, if not every year. Like if you look, he's won it something like 12 times out of the last 20 years or something.
Totally. I think Brendan Wagner, if I'm misremembering, I apologize, but I think, Dave taught Brennan really how to color comic books.
Yes, I've heard that.
And he's like, and I think when I talked to Brennan on this podcast, He's like, yeah, I mean, like I still use the same brush that Dave gave me. Like Dave gave me his digital brush, and that's what I use. I'm like, all
Oh,
right,
okay.
yeah, like go for it, man. Yeah, no, it's yeah, no, I mean, it's listen, I mean, some people are really just that good. Um, Todd Klein was that good when it came to lettering, on
Sure.
paper for 25 years, 30
Yeah.
years, just masterworks on pieces of paper.
Yeah, but there's not even Eisner for. There's it. I don't know if you know the movie Wag the Dog.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
there's that Dustin Hoffman getting a. There's no Oscar for producer. There's no Oscar for producer. Can you believe that? And there's no Eisner anymore for Inca, and
That's kind of
it baffles me.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, I know there aren't many of them,
Yeah. I
but
think I'm friends with like the last five. Like
okay.
I was sitting at Heroes this year with my buddies, and it's like Carl Story, Mark Morales, and Dexter Vaughn. Okay.
I've got the Jim Lee DC artist edition on the way. It was in the sale for IDW sale,
Okay.
and it's something that I wouldn't have. How can I put it? I mean, Jim Lee X-Men #1, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of my starting point. I got to quite a nice experience in about 2000, where Jim Lee was attending the Bristol Comic Con,
Mhm.
and we ended up. He was talking original art with my mate Joe Melchior, who's an art collector and now reps Dave Gibbons and Brian Bolland and
Who?
um,
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with those guys.
yeah, it's pronounced Bolland,
Oh, right.
Boll. Yeah.
Okay.
So he used to work at Comic Showcase, which had the Dark Knight and Watchmen art. Oh, sorry, the Watchmen art and Leonardi's art and Mick McMahon's art back in the 80s, and so
Mhm.
he's been around that scene for a very long time. But and Jim Lee collects art a bit,
Yeah,
and
a bit.
used to collect more and doesn't collect so much anymore, I believe. And in fact, that the Michael Golden Artist Edition that's coming up shortly,
Yep.
Jim Lee had all the art to the Marvel Fanfare issue
Mhm.
and sold it, but Scott Dampier got scans of it before he sold it, and that's how we're actually getting this book.
That's great.
I can't wait for that book. And
Yeah,
just
I know. I mean,
I don't have words. It's good.
well, Jim bought some really some very key golden artwork, to say the
Yeah,
least, back in the day, and that's and I guess we're in the long run, we're all going to be very fortunate for what he purchased, because it
yeah,
exists in a digital form now.
yeah. I think he
Yeah,
had Scott Dunby on his shoulder, like consigliere on the original art, just sort of pointing him at stuff a bit as well,
yeah.
like kind of sourcing stuff for him. But yeah, I've got that Jim Lee, going back to the Incas thing. The Jim Lee book I'm getting primarily for Scott Williams inks,
Hmm. Yeah,
because at some point I've kind of evolved from even if I'm not particularly enjoying what I see on the page from Jim Lee, because a lot of it now it's not for me, kind of video games and films, and but just seeing Scott Williams's lines
hmm.
is still like a constant pleasure. Um,
It was a great like I think that was a really a super fortunate combination. Like I think that's just like one of those things where these artists combine on the black and white artwork, which together, it's this chemistry that elevates it to another level that we all benefit from. Because I think what we consider maybe like, great John Byrne artwork is only great John Byrne artwork because Terry Austin or Joe Rubenstein was inking it.
yeah,
And or anybody from that point forward for different stuff. So yeah, it is kind of sad to that there's no inker award in the Eisner, because I don't know, it's such an integral part of the business, but the stylus has really replaced a lot of need on the production
yeah.
side.
when it also kind of diminishes, I feel like there's a place for like even like in awarding Incas. Like this year there was a nomination for best artist for um what's his name? Not Jeff Parker, Doc Shaner
Oh yeah,
and Mitch Gerard's got nominated for best artist as if they were one artist.
one person, right?
And I was like, well, that doesn't quite rhyme.
No,
Um,
no,
and I think it also got nominated for best series when it was a mini series as well. Like this year's Eisners, there are a couple of things where I was just like, I don't even know who's running this anymore. Like I don't
right.
know who this is by or who this is for really anymore. And don't
So,
get me wrong, I like those books, but
yeah, sure.
um,
No, no,
it
the
irritates.
consistency doesn't seem to be there, or at least for me, like the way my mind works, I get a little bent out of shape if like what seems to be the logical structure is not being adhered to, and I'm like, why? Wait a minute, no. Like, I mean, when you're just telling me this, I'm like, my part of my spine is tightening up just hearing it, and doesn't jive. Okay, so IDW. Ugh.
Yeah.
So technically not IDW,
Okay.
but still IDW in my heart. Um,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I'm going to pull out, right? So, bam, the Wintermen.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah,
I was terrified it wasn't coming. I was. It took so long to come, and between
yeah,
paper shortages and COVID and everything, and a lot of Kickstarter things that I support, you get sort of spammed with updates of
yeah,
we've just sent it to the printer, we've just read this. That was not the case with this project, and it was just like, okay, I've paid, they disappeared, I'm sure it's coming, but God,
yeah.
when is it coming? And it just makes me want to like, yeah, John Paul Leon, Kevin O'Neill. There's a few that have gone recently who it just makes me like profoundly sad.
Hmm.
It's such a mixed blessing to look at
Yeah,
something that amazing.
yeah. Yeah, it's super tough. I mean, I've known John since 1990. Yeah, 90.
Okay.
So he was a freshman in art school with me. So I was a senior
Oh,
and
really?
he was a
Okay.
freshman. So it was quite a he was in the he's on the same floor in the dormitory with me, and he would just sit there in the hallway with his sketchbook really was that large, as large as the book I just held up.
Yeah.
He would sit there drawing in it, and when you would walk by, he would like hold the book and he would like kind of pull it close to his chest so you couldn't see what he was drawing. And
Oh, really?
what's this kid doing? And then one day, another friend of his who happened to be a bit more sort of outgoing, said, "Oh, you haven't seen his artwork," so he ran off and basically just stole the book out of John JP's hand and came running back with it and handed it to me, and JP came running in tow, and that's how I sort of first talked to him.
Okay.
And you're blown away by this 18-year-old kid who's drawing like Michelangelo in his sketchbook, and like, what is going on here? And just the most amazing eye, and to consider, like, it's like you see a lot of people who have these great impacts in their in their careers as artists to other artists, but to see JP have an impact on his peers while still in college, like that
Yeah.
was the sign of how good he was, when his peers were looking at him and sort of beginning to sort of reshape themselves under his eye, like, how is he
Yeah.
looking at things, and how can I look at things like he does? So um yeah, just really an amazing talent, and just one of the nicest people who I've ever known. um
Yeah,
and
I think of him as like having a kind of, if you think of most, like the comparison is made so often about comics and films, but he almost had. It felt like he had more like a documentarian's kind of eye. You
Hmm.
know, there was something about his capturing of. It always looked quite absurd. Although he did Earth X and it looks amazing,
Yeah.
it was always quite absurd on something like, I don't know, Tom Strong or Ex Machina, where he's drawing like
Hmm.
loads of just like normal stuff and it all looks amazing. And then there's a man in a jetpack, and it was sort of quite incongruous. It still
Hmm.
looked amazing,
Right.
I'm not saying the style detracted from it, because it was always amazing, but it was there's something about, and that's where the Wintermen stuff comes in, because he it was just so sort of kind of dirty and fly on the wall, you know,
Yeah.
and he just managed to pull you in while never making you feel like he was doing it. It was like magic, like proper magic.
So a lot of that, I mean, aside from whatever his natural inclination was as a as a person with a pencil in his hand, he had a great mentor at SVA. This illustrator Jack Potter was his
Oh
teacher.
yeah,
So Potter and John Ruggieri were sort of these two teachers of his in his 4 years there, and though in their methodology in their drawing classes, which I took those as well, they were life drawing classes, but not specifically life drawing. Like, here's a model on a on a plinth, draw them. They
mm,
would make you go out and do environment drawings. So you would go out and you would sit and draw in the style that they were sort of preaching, and that was how you would go out and you would go draw a cityscape or a store or whatever it was, and that
yeah,
was the kind of jam that you would do. And I think that really informed a lot of how JP looked at the worlds he was creating on paper. He was not so much focused on making these action scenes. He was more engaged in creating the worlds that these scenes took place.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. And then so Brett, who wrote Wintermen, and John were in school together as well. So
Okay,
Brett was a fellow classmate of ours. So this was sort of a long-term relationship, with those two.
yeah.
And yeah, so the fact that thing came together, for two friends and happened, and it was as sort of revolutionary as it was, it's
Well,
great.
it had the so it had the thing. So it was the second time. Waiting for the artist edition was the same as Is It Going to End? Because it had that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where are
Mhm.
the last three issues?
Right.
6 is a special, like, you know. So the last part of it is, it's a little more condensed than was probably
Yes.
planned or whatever. You're probably aware of more of the story behind all of that than I am. But I was just so glad that it actually finished, because it felt like it was going to be okay. So now I want to sit next to big numbers in my head of
Oh,
unfinished comics that.
yeah. I think I pulled that out last year, big numbers, and I went through the what is it, the two issues, and I'm like,
Yeah.
man, this is so exciting, and then back in the box it
Oh,
goes. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that they were able to, Bernard and Tommy and Scott were able to pull this book off, because it really just is a great tribute, to this,
Yeah.
to just someone. So this is kind of something I think about, and maybe you have an opinion on it. Like, there's kind of like a very small kind of like sort of like this sort of tree of art influence in comic books. Like, it's kind of interesting how it works. Everyone like thinks, oh, Kirby, but if you think of Kirby's influence on comic books, it doesn't seem to have the longevity that you would say the king of comic books would have influenced. There's not a lot of people out there doing Kirby in
Yeah.
so many ways. But then you think of an artist like Alex Toth, whose influence still, like to this day, is super strong. John Paul and Cliff Chang and many other people are still very much Toth-esque.
Yeah, but I think but I think Toth re-emerged, having gone away for a while. Like I think his influence was kind of latent, you know.
Yeah.
And I think Batman Year One had
Hmm.
something to do with bringing that style to the front again. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the people that you just mentioned probably came to Toth backwards through Batman Year One, based on
Sure.
the age, I suppose, that they are. You know, in my head, that I
Yeah.
guess that's about 5 years before they probably started like really ramping up their drawing. But yeah, no, it's nuts. Like, and there's people now. There's Leonardo Romero, that guy, Fornes, who's doing Tom King's
Yeah. Sure.
current book. Like, you know, people keep saying, "Oh, it looks really like David Mazzucchelli." It's like, I think that's the plan. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Right.
think I don't think there's much else going. I mean, it's nice, but it's very David Mazzucchelli. Um, but you know, you're right. But I kind of, my brother used to have a T-shirt, and if you Google it, it's like a tree of heavy metal, and they've done more of them. But
Hmm.
it's got all the different bands, or tree of rock or whatever, and it's got all the different bands logos,
Right.
and they're kind of spaced where they are within time, so you
Hmm.
can kind of see, if you can get like a decent image of it to zoom in on, you can see kind of like your Guns N' Roses sitting next to your Bon Jovi or whatever,
Right.
and and I kind of, I've had an idea. I'd love to sort of map out the sort of
The comic book.
genealogy of comic artists
Dude.
as I see it.
Yeah. Well, no,
Because
this floats in my head, you know, like I keep, you know, this idea. And it's so funny you were saying the music, because while you were talking, it, you know, and you were saying how like there's these artists and they're kind of rooting it back to Mazzucchelli, but not carrying it deeper in, at least at first. Um,
yeah,
and you know, I think about all these sort of, um, you know, bands out there who have this very sort of high gain sound. Bless you. Um,
thank you.
and they, you know, they have this very certain sound with their guitars and their amplifiers. And you look at all their amplifiers, they're all using Eddie Van Halen's amplifier. They're using Eddie Van Halen's amplifier, but they're never like saying, "Yeah, man, we're huge Van Halen fans." Like they never say that, because
Yeah,
they're a whole generation at least away from that music from the early 80s,
yeah,
late 70s, which that sound that one dude invented, you know, has now spawned a whole industry of this crunchy, gainy tone, which,
yeah,
you know, the world has sort of benefited from, you know, if you're into that metal
yeah,
sound.
yeah.
And I think Toth is kind of like one of those people. You know, I'm, you know, being who I am, I'm going to say I think pound for pound, Golden is the most influential comic artist per body of work.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah. Kevin Nolan's probably not far behind him
right?
in
And
terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
like, so having done so little, but what little he's done has moved the needle.
Yeah, I mean, the work that Kevin has done is blown, like it's blown everyone's mind. Like, I mean, he's influenced Adam Hughes, you know. I mean, that's
Yeah,
like, you know, he's influenced Mignola, you know, and who's been a
yeah,
huge influence on so many other people. But I don't think, I'm not sure if Mike would have had that angular sort of usage of spotting blacks if Kevin wasn't sort of doing that. Um,
yeah. And I think you see a change in Mignola after, although that Aliens Sacrifice graphic novel
mhm.
was, it felt a little bit like a missed opportunity. And I know, my understanding is that Mignola wanted Nolan to go heavy and
Yeah,
turn it into a Nolan job, but Nolan didn't want to, and Mignola's pencils are solid enough or whatever, I guess. But but I see a change in Mignola's style after he's been inked by Kevin Nolan as well,
yeah,
within Hellboy. I mean, he's pretty far from it at this point in time, but there's a period of time when that influence becomes even more sort of pronounced in his sort of rendering,
yeah.
as stuff disappears into smoke or flames or whatever. It suddenly gets very Nolan-y, you know?
It is, because I mean, if you think about like what Iron Wolf, I think Craig Russell inked Iron Wolf,
Yeah,
you know, which is, I love that book. You know, I think it's phenomenal. But like it's very linear, like the whole thing is very linear, comparatively. Even Fafford and the Gray Mouser is kind of linear, even though there's a lot of sort of chunky blacks in there. It's not what we
Yeah.
think about with that Hellboy blacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Kevin is really just such a unique approach to, putting form on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking at that again, the art, we've got another artist edition. So next year we're getting like Nolan 1 month and then Golden the next, I think, in terms of artist editions. But yeah, going back to, sticking with Nolan.
Yeah.
That evolution from like Dalgoda and the Fantagraphics covers and stuff that he did, to that New Mutants, to that Man Bat, to the Outsiders, just all of these different jobs, and he's always himself, but always changing it up. He seems to be having fun. So if he's doing a Hulk cover or a Wolverine cover, he's going to do his Hulk or his Wolverine and not necessarily anyone else's. And that's like really admirable that he gets to do what he wants as well, But yeah, that Michael Golden, that Marvel Fanfare issue, that was one of those, like, nobody talked about it for the longest time because it was buried at like 3 issues before the end of the run of a comic that people had stopped paying attention to.
Was it 46? Is this issue 46 or
48? Yeah, 46, 48. I think it's
something like that. Which is like, this is what, and I think I said that recently on one of the recent episodes, like that's the one comic I will buy over and over again. Like if I see a copy, I buy it.
Yeah, you won't leave it because you can give it to somebody.
Yeah, it is. Don't think I've referred a comic more than that one to other people. I've referred that comic to so many people because nobody knows about it. Like it's just one of these weirdo. I mean, everyone knows about it now because of cartoonist Kayfabe did an episode.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
But they didn't know about it. Someone else had to tell them about it, and so now I probably can't find an issue of it. But it's really is, it's brilliant. I mean, it's not his favorite work of his comic wise, but
do you know what his favorite work is?
Oh yeah, no, it's the G.I. Joe yearbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. I mean,
yeah. No, I mean, in a great piece, but the thing is I just feel that I feel more of his now. It's such a hard thing to say. I mean, but like that yearbook is him sort of like doing something that no one's really seen before at a level that, really has never been sort of touched. But that fanfare is a very strange story. Now, I don't know the absolute all ins and outs of it, but that was done many, many years before. And it kind of sat around for a long time because of X, Y, and Z reasons, or X, Y, and Z.
Very interesting. Because the editorial suggests that it was at least, it took a long time the editorial has got that Al Milgrom jokingly getting like spider webs on his shoulders because it took so long to draw or whatever. So it's interesting to hear that it was done earlier.
Because if you look at the opening pages of that, pages of that look a lot like the first 2 fanfare issues.
Yeah, they're more that kind of wobbly sort of rights, and
they're very like highly rendered, brushy, and then it slips into being done with a pen throughout the remainder of that. And there are reasons. But yeah, it's an interesting tale, but it did kind of sit around, and the coloring is super unique because some of it's done using sheet coloring, which is like cutting ruby lith.
Yeah.
So like if you look at the coloring, it's
all that stuff inside when they're inside and they got the uplighting. Yeah. Okay.
It's this very geometric stuff. So it's rather than just sitting and coloring it with Doc Martin dyes. It wasn't done that way. It was coated with like what I think are sheets of ruby lith, just to say, okay, this is going to be that color, this is going to be that color. And that's why it has this incredibly graphic feel, on the color end. yeah, I mean, I can't wait for that one to come out because it really is, and I vow now not to buy any copy of the artist edition to give that away for free because that will put me in the poorhouse.
Absolutely. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably going to be nice enough that you might have to.
Yeah. Stop it. Don't say that. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, listen, like going back to talking about Leonardi, I mean, we would all love to see some comic books drawn by Michael because it's
Yeah.
just, to see him solve problems visually is a very it's a luxury of our time to see someone have that ability to do the things that he can do. We don't have
Yeah.
Alex Toth solving the problems anymore.
No, this is like, I don't know if it's just commercial art that's taking these people away and keeping them busy. If they actually do have decent pensions that mean that, or if it's the commissions type world that manages to keep people. I know Golden's got like a big commercial art career that he's had going on the whole time, right?
Right.
Um, but you look at going back to the Incas thing, like Bob Layton, Joe Rubenstein, like these people were just off the scene, and are they just sort of retired, doing the con circuit, getting house in Florida, and then do the cons every summer or something. I don't know, but it feels like a loss that this sort of this talent isn't around.
I came up with this idea last year, I think it was, and I thought, like, wouldn't it be like, it seems to me now, I'll bash my own idea after I give out my idea as this brilliant idea. The brilliance of it is there's all this wonderful talent out there that people just love. Like, it's like looking at those X-Men books that John Byrne did, the sort of
These bootleg ones.
his bootleg, yeah, his bootlegs. And I'm like, why is DC and why is Marvel not just creating a line, like a legacy line, which pairs up all these sort of classic creators and put them on the books, that there's a couple generations who are just dying to see more of this stuff. Because it's a no-brainer and it would sell. Like, if you paired up Claremont and Byrne on the X-Men, people would buy that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Don't worry about continuity. Let the stories happen. And Leonardi, throw him on, Cloak and Dagger, and we'll be happy again, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
the thing is that I come up with this and everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I go, except for the fact that the reasons that these people stopped doing those books and working for these companies, that reason hasn't changed. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like, yeah, okay, so like, you're not going to get paid enough.
Yeah, and combined with an awful lot of editors who have come from like magazines and don't actually have much of a comic pedigree, and don't necessarily know one end of an X-Man from the other.
Yeah.
I think we're lucky that, like, it's what Marie Javins or whatever at DC at the moment. And I'd be really interested to know the decision-making process for all these different sort of lines and random comics that are just getting thrown out there. And I'm not quite sure how DC, I'm not interested in 28 Batman comics, but if you can get one by someone good, then I'll read it and hope that I can understand it. Whereas, yeah, I just think there's editors who both young and don't come from a comics background as well, who don't necessarily have the insight to pull from talent from 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it may be also those relationships don't exist. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, but Marie is the kind of person, like, for DC, there's so much industry love for her. Like, we all love her. Like, I mean, she was my editor and my friend. Like, these are like, if she called up and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" I'd be like, "Well, of course I would be interested. Let's talk." Not that
Yeah.
anybody's giving me a call, but the point is that Marie is that person who everybody digs. And
Okay.
she's not the only one. There are plenty of people out there who could hold that sort of clout in the eyes of creators maybe who have not been working for the big two for a while. But
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm happy to throw that idea out there and hope maybe somebody grabs it, because
Yeah,
it would be great to see some of these, these books that could be done, because I don't think, listen, yeah, sure, who doesn't love some nostalgia? I would love to see, I would have loved to see, a few more George Perez Teen Titans stuff. If you could just
yeah,
do some of that stuff, it would have been great.
yeah. Or Roger Stern writing more event, like Roger Stern's my sort of go-to kind
Mhm.
of Bronze Age writer. Like he's the I feel like he managed. I'm more of an art guy than a writer's guy, but Roger Stern managed to do that, like overly wordy, kind of Claremont style, but in a way that's actually quite readable. Like
Yeah,
never gets boring in the same way as, like, I can't read Chris Claremont comics now
yeah,
as an adult, but Roger Stern was the one who still towed that kind of sort of nerdy continuity line, like Kurt
yeah.
Busiek and Mark Waid or whatever. And I think he was probably like like the antecedent for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, there was some great stuff Stern did in the 70s. It was just magic. And then okay, so here's my this is so for me, this was like maybe my favorite thing that I grabbed this year, the Martini
Yeah,
edition of
yeah.
Parker. Um,
What a book! I was just a friend just asked today because he's just gotten into the novels and been
yeah,
really enjoying them, and he loves Darwin Cook, and he was like, "How about the Martini editions?" And myself, there's three of us in this chat, and
yeah,
the other two of us were just like, "Just do it, do it, do it, do it." It's,
yeah,
it's one of the best looking books I own, I
yeah.
think.
No, they did. I mean, it's a bang up job, and it is absolutely beautiful. And you know the the source material is great, and I think how Darwin really kind of interpreted it for for the comic page really worked, you know, perfectly.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the stuff at the back, the pin-ups of like the Hollywood versions.
yeah,
So you get to see Cook doing his Michael Caine, and
yeah,
just amazing. And the second one's great as well. It does feel it definitely feels odd, that Cook didn't get to put it together himself the same way as he did the first one. But I think Sean Phillips did a really good job, and it's
mhm,
got, um, like, if you got the first one, get the second one,
yeah,
obviously. But it's got the illustrations that Cook did for the novel, the hardcover, plus all
mhm,
the illustrations that he drew but didn't get to finish. That would have been for the next hardcover in the series. So you got a load of kind of sort of Darwin Cook does these kind of Robert Fawcett type illustrations for the novels. I mean,
sick,
just but yeah,
yeah,
and it took me a while to spot the martini being Parker's eye, or it took me a while to spot Parker's eye being an olive in a martini glass or
mhm,
whatever. But
yeah.
I think despite being visually literate, I have my visually illiterate moments.
It's okay. There's a lot of stuff that I miss all the time. Yeah, I mean it's as I said, man, it's a golden age, and we're getting some great stuff, even though that's not new. It's new to me, and it's just you know there's you can't turn around and not see something amazing coming out. Um,
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I keep getting sucked down the, like, new old people route.
mhm,
I mean, the Aragones thing. It's not like Aragones is new to me,
right.
but a friend posted, a Marshall Rogers Doctor Strange page, and I'd never seen. I had his Batman's.
Okay.
Batman sounds wrong, but I had his Batman run, and then I got rid of them and got the reprints because he coloured them himself, and
Mm,
they look amazing. Like the Terry Austin inks on the backs of the paper just looks amazing. And then, yeah, the Marshall Rogers Doctor Stranges, that was a discovery from like the last year and a half, and I've become a
right.
total Marshall Rogers evangelist in the in the last sort of year and a bit. And it's great with comics that you can feel like you know everything, or you can feel like you've seen everything, and then all it takes is one job or one person's perspective on something to make you see something in a new light and go, actually, no, that guy's probably my favorite guy now for
Right,
the
right.
next however long, but just down a rabbit hole. Like this year was the year of Frank Thorne as well.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Subject matter wasn't really my thing, and so I never really looked at it again. And then I just saw a couple of splash pages and saw his own colors, or Glennis Oliver's or Glennis Ween's colors
Mhm.
over him, and something just clicked. And so I've ended up with the artist editions of Gita and Trace. I spent like £300 in a
Yeah.
month and just got everything. It's just it's great to still be able to glom on to someone and just have to track down their whole body of work as a compulsion.
Well, I think I mean, the cool thing is that there's always more good things being made that are sort of outside of your periphery. And they're not gone. So you can always
Yeah.
discover them in some fashion. And, and it's the best thing when you're having conversation like this with anybody, and they're like, "Oh, have you made, make sure to see, nice house on the lake." "Oh, okay, I'll go find it." And then, and the next thing you know, you're like, "Oh, this is really like the best thing I've read in a long time or looked at." Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of cool thing about it. And I think that's what's kind of cool. Like, I think whatever you're into, I think all that stuff exists if it's collecting ping pong paddles. I don't know if that's a thing.
It's
Making
probably a thing.
Why not? Let's make it a thing. We could have the foremost collection of ping pong paddles in the northern hemisphere, and then be the guys.
There's a podcast on the BBC called The Boring Talks, and it's a guy. It was based on a series of lectures I believe he gave, but it's basically experts on stuff
Okay.
giving talks about stuff that should be really boring, like
Right.
ping pong paddles, and just but talking about it with a depth of knowledge
Yeah.
and enthusiasm that makes it compelling. Like really, it's really interesting. Not everyone's a winner. It's different experts on their subject matter. But like one of them was about road markings and how with
Okay.
the advent of the car, they had to come up with road markings. So
Mhm.
then, all these things that we take for granted as just being on the roads, somebody had to sit around and go, well, what if we made them go around corners instead of going straight? Like, had to come up with
Yeah.
all these. So do we do circles for stop? But circles are kind of goey, aren't they? And so there's all this kind of stuff. And there were like committees, and this particular expert dug into the history of it all to
There's
find out the decision making process. But yeah, Boring Talks is really good.
Okay, yeah. And my graphic design brain is yelling at me right now. I think there's a really famous woman who was a graphic designer who was involved in the UK when it came to the designing of road signs. Like, she was
Oh, okay.
like super influential in how that all kind of came together in what we consider the modern um road sign. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I mean, listen, I'm fascinated by pretty much any, like, if somebody's like, you can tell me something in an interesting fashion, I'm in. Like, I
Yeah.
love information in detail, and I will soak it all up. And I don't care what the subject is, as long as it's, comprehensive, I'll get into it. So the
It's
boring podcast, I'll
Yeah,
find
the
it.
Boring Talks, and it's
Yeah.
one of the nice things about my job. I work in fisheries, and I don't know anything about fisheries. It's not something I've studied. So I know more than a lot of people now after 6 or 7 years in it. But just chatting to experts,
Yeah.
explaining why herring act the way they act, and the different temperatures at different depth, like the right person giving me that information, and I'll drink it up the same, And then
Yeah.
halfway through, they're like, "Sorry, I'm probably boring you." It's like, no, you're really not. Keep
But you're
going.
sitting there like you're sitting there with some tea going, no, keep going.
Yeah. Oh, barman, bring us
Yeah, right.
another.
Yeah, it's the truth. My wife is always like, she's like, you are always like hunting and learning new things. I'm like, I can't help it. Like, I have to. Like, it's just a compulsion. Like, what's the new thing? I can become involved with. Like, it's just how my stupid mind works. So anything else that was like a big standout for you for the year, or that you?
Um, I mean, Supergirl I mentioned,
Yeah,
like that
you're not the
was,
only. Lots of people have
yeah,
said Supergirl was great.
yeah. I thought again, I thought it was a little bit of a stumble writing wise towards the end, but not anything that, like, I spoke to a friend about it afterwards, and in fact he came to me and said, did you understand what happened? And so we both had similar moments and worked it out together. So it was a little bit of a strange turn, but who cares when it looks that good, you know?
Right.
And she's another one. I sort of went back and got all of her issues of the Dreaming that she did, because she did quite a few of those with
Hmm.
Spuria. Um, but yeah, otherwise I've bought a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Batman the Night I found um, really interesting, and it surprised me. That was Chip Zdarsky and
Yeah.
Carmen Sandigiminianico. Yeah, if I see it written down, I'll get it on the second time, but I'm never going to remember it. But that was surprising. I think he looks like he must be like a studio mate or something of um, Kamen. You know, it's a very similar sort of
Mm.
style, and incorporates a lot of digital again, so you can see that the backgrounds are done digitally, but the whole thing like sort of composites together really nicely,
Yeah.
and Chip Zdarsky did a really good story, one of those Batman sort of traveling around getting his skills type stories. Sort of takes me back to stories that I feel like I've read, but maybe I just wanted to read them. Are there many of those
You can
stories?
do
It
that.
feels like one page in a lot of Batman stories, but it's never quite been
Yeah.
extrapolated.
I mean, I think that's the exciting part about writing. Is that when you find that foothold of an idea, you can go, oh, I can really kind of get something out of this, and you start, building and climbing off of this one sort of toehold. Um, and that's kind of how a lot of comic books, especially like with existing, properties, you sort of something inspires you from this little tiny thing, and then you
Yeah,
go, what if I did this? And the next thing you know, you have this whole world sort of spun off of this one little idea, which, makes these sort of keeps Batman fresh and all these other characters fresh for decades.
I think that's Mark Wade's talent, right? Mark Wade's
Mhm.
talent is sort of picking up on this one throwaway skill that someone's got or something, and then leaning hard into it, or
Mhm.
just thinking about things of like, well, how would you feel if that was your power, and then just doing a 60 issue long Daredevil run based on
Right.
that question or whatever. But you made me think about that Man Bat annual, um, where the Man Bat story where Jan Stranad and Nolan sort of tied together the origins of Batman and Man Bat as being like
Mhm.
the bat was blinded by a scientist, which is why it flew through the window, creating Batman. You know, this
Right.
kind of the
This
the
loop.
the relationship is there, and then Batman threw away the medicine that would have saved him. So Batman created Man Bat, and Man Bat created Batman,
Right.
and just all based on just the kernel of an idea, based on the origins of these characters, and then just sort of neatly tying them up in such a way. Just, yeah, love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of stuff that really, it's the difference between fan service and actually just quietly demonstrating an understanding of what fans want to see.
Yeah.
I don't need every Star Wars thing to say, I got a bad feeling about this. Yeah, okay, we get it, we get it, we get it.
Yeah.
But there's other ways to demonstrate that you're on the inside, and you know what people want to see from these properties. I think.
Yeah, no, and that's, it's really interesting you brought the Star Wars thing, because for me, like, Andor has been like some of the most interesting Star Wars in a long time, because it's not about all the Star Wars that we've been talking about for years. This is
Yeah,
the periphery of that universe, and I like this kind of approach that we're getting. Okay, here is a character study. Here is a drama. We're not so much focused on pow zap, chop chop with a lightsaber. And I love a lightsaber fight. That's great. But
Yeah.
it's interesting to see this. And I think it's kind of that approach where you can go, okay, but what if we just took this one character and went back in time and brought that character up to the point where we know this character entering into the storyline? And I think that's, I don't know, it's just an interesting way to write stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
I think that makes it. I mean, I've only seen the first two episodes, and I'm planning to watch it. I want to watch it with a clear head because most of this stuff I get to watch after my wife goes to bed, which is after we've had a day, with our son or working or whatever. And so I've got a loggy head and fall asleep. And I kind of, my understanding of Andor is that it's probably good enough to give some real sort of headspace to. But I did watch The Mandalorian, both seasons of that, and that feels like it had moments of doing what you're talking about,
yeah,
and then moments of completely sort of throwing every Star Wars trick in the book at you to,
right.
and just it's like episode by episode. I found it really variable, and yeah, you sort of see the directors' names and start watching out for them, um, and thinking, okay, it's going to be one of those ones, is it?
Yeah. And I guess it's, I think I've just at that point in my life where I don't really need fan servicing. I just need a good story. Um, and they can be both. I'm not saying that can't be, but I need something that is going to be good story first. I don't care what it's about. I don't care who did what. Just give me the good story.
Yeah, which brings us to Spider Verse. I haven't seen the trailer yet. The Spider Verse 2 trailer just came out the last couple of days now, and that
Yeah.
that, that film was the first one was that it was like, here's a load of stuff, and we're not going to lay it on thick.
Hmm.
We're not going to have loads of wink jokes,
Right.
um, about Aunt May and Doctor Octopus or anything. It's just, here's some Spider-Man stuff for you, and that feels so much nicer. And Rick Leonardi's Spidey 2099,
Hmm.
like I saw something on Twitter today that kind of implies that he was probably contracted to work up designs and stuff for the film. So that's
Yeah.
pretty exciting as well.
That is. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think Into the Spider-Verse might be one of the best superhero movies,
Yeah,
period. Like it's just so good. I mean, it's like Superman, you know, Winter Soldier, and that movie might just be the creme de la creme for me. Um,
yeah, I'm with you on Superman. I struggle. Winter Soldier's probably up there, sort of Marvel wise, but I just it's just I've just got like Marvel soup in my head at this point. I sort of can't distinguish one from. I remember how I felt when I saw them,
mhm.
but I can't remember anything
I
about any specific one anymore.
Yeah, I turned to my friend. We used to go like my wife and his wife. We would all go see these movies together every whatever 4 months it seemed like, and and then the last of the Avengers movies happened, and I kind of like sat there and I turned to him. I said, "I think I'm done."
Yeah, me too.
And he was like, "What?" He couldn't understand it. And like 6 to 8 months later, a year later, he like called me. He's like, "I understand what you mean." And I'm like, yeah, like, and it's not, I don't have anything against anything. I enjoyed all the stuff, but I don't really need to do it now. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
yeah. I fell asleep at the start of Endgame rather than the end, so I think
Right.
that might have something to do with parenthood. But I went to see it at the cinema, and I fell asleep. All the stuff where they went back in time and did Ant-Man stuff.
Hmm.
I basically fell asleep as soon as he put the suits on, and then woke
Right.
up, and I stayed awake for the rest of it and enjoyed the rest of it fine. But no, very very much. If I see the right sort of directors or writers come along, I don't think it's unsalvageable. Like Star Wars with Andor maybe,
Hmm.
but so much of it just feels like the same thing over and over again. Where you're going to get like a great opening episode, maybe the first five are great, and then you start to get towards the third act, and
Yeah.
and and you can't even be bothered because you pretty much know where it's going beyond moments, beyond, oh, and then Moon Knight did that thing that he did in issue 26. It's like,
Right.
well, I can just, oh, there's a jazz band. That's a reference that,
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't watched She-Hulk. I'll get round to them. I'll probably look
Yeah.
at Man Thing first, the black and white one. Is that the one, or Werewolf by
Oh,
Night? One of them.
yeah, Werewolf by Night. I haven't watched it yet, and a lot of people said it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
I'll put eyes on it. Yeah. On a tangential note, if you can see The Fablemans, go see The Fablemans, the new Steven Spielberg movie.
Okay. Is
It's so
that the
good.
one that's like a flashback to the 50s and
Well,
like it's like his origin story?
yeah, it's his origin story. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's really quite good. And yeah, when you see
Okay.
it, I mean, wait for it to come out on whatever service you can watch it on. But it's I mean, it's worth going into the theater if you're a cinema person. But it's a great movie.
Okay. No, I'll take that recommendation. I saw the trailer for it on something, and quite fancied the look of it. Spielberg's one of those, beyond the obvious sort of early stuff. Spielberg's one of those people that I'm sort of like Tom Hanks or something. It took me a while for me to realize that I love everything that they do.
Right.
And so regardless of my sort of reluctance up front, I always enjoy it. So get over it. You like Tom Hanks,
Yeah, right.
you like Tom Hanks, you like Steven Spielberg, even though it's going to be a kid in a tree crying, or
Sure.
there's always going to be a kid crying, and that's his thing. But beyond that, you like what he does. So
Yeah, I remember having that sort of that vision a long time ago with Tom Cruise. I was like sort of like, oh,
I didn't want to say
Tom
Tom
Cruise.
Cruise, but that's the other one.
And then I'm like, what am I saying? I enjoy all his movies. Why am I saying this? And so
Yeah.
I just said, fine, I'm gonna go see them, and I don't care. I'm gonna have a good time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a bigger man than me because he was the third one on the list, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to mention Tom Cruise because he can be difficult. But yeah, I'm the same.
No, it's just a fact. I mean, consummate professionals are consummate professionals, and you can't, was it don't hate the player, hate the game, or however that goes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not cool enough to even know what the phrase is. Yeah. So, and then we saw White Noise, which is the new Adam Driver movie.
Okay.
Noah Baumbach wrote it and directed it, and it's really, really good. It comes out on Netflix, I think, in a week or two. So,
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we got to see it in the theaters, and it's just fantastic. So,
Did Noah Baumbach do the previous Adam Driver film?
yeah,
Was it that love story, marriage story? Was that?
Yeah. This is another Netflix movie deal.
Okay.
And yeah, it's great. I mean, big, my wife didn't even know what it was. She's like, I'm taking you to the movies. And I'm like, okay. And there's like a scary scene, and she is not a scary movie person. And she leans over and she's like, is this a horror movie? And the description, when you look on it online, says horror movie. And I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be. Like, I'm trying to like talk her off the ledge. And thankfully it was only like one really scary scene. So
Okay.
yeah.
And
but
scary jumpy or scary? Like what kind
scary
of scare?
suspense, like suspense
Okay.
scary, like you don't know, like, is somebody going to get killed kind of thing. But
Okay.
it follows more in the if it's a horror movie, it's actually under the disaster film horror movie kind of subject. So it's not really that. And it's great. It's such a great discussion on basically consumerism being a byproduct of existential dread. Like, it's this really interesting,
I don't know what they're talking about.
I
cannot relate at all.
Yeah, it's the man with the big stack of books to read, right? Yeah, it's pretty damn good. So I can highly recommend it as a film. Yeah. So I don't know. Crazy. Dude, it's been great talking with you.
Yeah, I mean, no, I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah. It's so like I always feel weird when I say to people like, oh, I've like met this really nice person on Twitter, and like, and meet these people out there who are really just interesting, people that you really have these kind of nice connections with. And I'm like, oh wow, cool. And I'm gonna have this guy that I met on Twitter on the show, and I'm like, I don't feel crazy saying that because like we lock up on so many good things. Oh, those great sort of combined PDFs that you sent me of
The
um,
Toth.
the Toth thing and the Edmund Bielkovic work and the
Tony
Robbins.
Salmons.
I think it
Oh,
was
the Robbins is a work in progress. Yeah.
yeah. Um, they're great, man. Like absolutely. Like I just love those things.
Oh,
They're
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to share them with people discreetly. You know,
Yeah, sure,
I'm not
sure.
precious about them as long as I don't end up in prison.
Let them try to get you.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, no,
I did do one that I got. The Lulu were like, I think this might be copyrighted material, and I'm like, yeah, but they're not publishing it. I mean, I'm publishing it because they're not. I'll buy it if they publish it.
right.
So I had a little scary moment, and I'm not sure if I've shared that one with you, but I will do when we
Okay.
finish.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, I think I think what's really interesting is how you have it. Your sort of your collector's intention. You know, you're cataloging and you're sort of I don't know. It's
It's an
beyond.
archive.
Yeah. No, it's an archive, and I mean, listen, I'm the same way. Like, I ripped every cover off of every golden comic book that I got, and I have them all collected. I don't have the comic books of whatever was inside because I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
And I have every all the Nam stuff like in original size,
Oh yeah.
in black and white because I'm like, there's information here. Like this is cool stuff. So but it's very narrow focused. It's really on this one dude. So
Yeah. Well, look, I've got a pile of. I've currently got Roy Thomas and Walt Simonson's history of the Hyborian Age, Hyborian Age, which ran in Conan Saga in like 4-page, 5-page installments. So I picked up all of those this kind of COVID life, with an idea to doing like a Simonson's black and white magazines kind of in one place. But basically, I don't do them until I'm confident I got everything. Like the worst thing would be to put together this whole thing. The Toth book, for me to publish the book, cost me about 90 quid. So to publish that book and then someone go, did you get the 5-pager that you did in? And be like, no.
Yeah.
So I have to be convinced I've got everything. But I was thinking about doing a golden one for all like the Pit and the Pendulum and the Batman family stuff.
Yep.
And then DC did that collection, and that sort of took the wind out of my sails a little bit. But yeah, there's a couple more. All the Chaikin painted stuff. I'm thinking I bought. There was somebody selling on eBay a shitty, not the best Chaikin sketch.
Okay.
And as a bonus, they were throwing in a binder full of clipped out Chaikin stories from heavy metal, from epic, from everywhere. In the UK, they published The Shadow at like magazine size.
Oh wow!
So I've got all of those pages. So I've got like a thick binder, a lever arch folder, about 4 inches thick, full of Chaikin. And so I'm tempted to do because he's not doing Starbuck or whatever, and Dominic Fortune. I'm thinking to do like a book that's got all of that heavy metal, and I've got decent scans of a Starbuck story that was only published in Spain. And I have a professional friend who's a letterer or who's an artist who letters his own work, and he's volunteered to I'll translate it, and then he'll put the dialogue in it because it's never been published in English.
Right.
So stick that in there as well. It's like a 30-page Starbucks story that was only published in Spain. So
and you get to break out your Spanish chops again. Look at you.
Exactly. Yeah. And my mate gets to pretend to be Ken Brusniak or John Workman or whatever. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a few things floating in my brain for when my son is 18 or something. I don't know, but the black and
Right.
white ones are easy. The color ones are the Frank Robbins and the Toth are the worst because the coloring's all over the place, and you need
Yeah.
to fix so much, and depending on the quality of the copies you're getting, you get those pages in old comics where the black's pretty much all gone and the
Yep.
line work's gone around the edges, printed onto the adverts on the facing pages and stuff. So it's when it gets a little bit restoration-y, it gets a bit challenging.
And I'm sure you
Yeah.
can't. Maybe you can get a grant for that.
Well, I was thinking, like with the Toth one, when I put it out, I put out the PDF online. I went from like, whatever you do, don't share it with anyone, or you can tell so and so, but tell him not to tell anyone. To fuck it, I'll put it out, and I mean, what's going to happen? And what happened was nothing happened.
Right.
No. But the ideal scenario is somebody at DC goes, "You've done all this work. Can we
Right.
have it? Can we? If we don't sue you, can we publish that book?" It'll be like, "Yeah, great, do it."
Sure. Can I get some copies? There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, all I need is a couple of comps from me and some friends, and you can do some
Yeah.
lovely hardcovers.
Just send me a box. That'd be fine. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, but they're great. And I guess maybe if people find you on Twitter and slowly build up a relationship and friendship with you, they may end up with their very own copy.
Exactly. Exactly. It's an exclusive club within Twitter. I mean, it's
Yeah.
but yeah,
Well,
the
hey,
Robin's
seriously,
Batman. Yum.
thanks for sharing your evening with me because this was an absolute pleasure. And as I knew it would be.
Yeah, cool. And if ever you've got anyone on that you think I can talk about or talk to, and you
Yeah.
want some company on one, by all means, let me know. I'm happy to play second fiddle.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, there may be some people, especially on your side of the Atlantic, who might be nice to have someone running shotgun with me. So,
Cool. All right.
Yeah, Billy, and yeah, I guess where can people find you if you want? Do you want anybody to find you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm my name. If you can find me anywhere, it's always by my name. I'm just Billy Hynes. I nearly gave my email away. I'm Billy Hynes. You can find
There
me.
you go. You can find him.
Yeah,
You can find him by finding me and then just finding him through me. That's an
that works too.
easy way because I'm following him. So, yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, keep putting up the stuff you do because they're just like this conversation. I get to write stuff down and go find things that are pretty cool. So
Super. Glad to hear
yeah,
it.
man, keep loving and get reading. You're a little bit behind on your stack.
Yeah, well, you'll see more coming up for sale as I realise that it was good, but I don't need to read it twice. That's what's happening there.
Right. So if we know, so what I need to know is I need to know the list of what you're getting and what you're not selling, and then I can say that's the good stuff.
Exactly. I'll try and get better about listing the stuff that I'm not selling.
Still keeping. All right, Billy.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon, man, and I appreciate it. And to everyone else,
Take care.
until next time.
Have a good day.
Thanks.